we're finally getting to the slightly less devastating stories.
I'm excited.
I know I told you it might be cryptid-y.
Yeah.
But I went a different direction.
Lied.
I did. So, oh, shoot. We have an intro. Welcome to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I am Kim.
And I'm Jilli.
Okay, let's act like we've done this before. Okay, so today, in honor of spooky things, I am going to talk to you about some urban legends.
Ooh, okay.
It's going to be kind of a short one because in doing research about urban legends, it seems that a lot of things are shoved into that category, like aliens.
Yeah.
So like Area 51 came up a lot, which would require its own
In an urban
episode.
legend?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I think everybody knows what an urban legend is, but they're fictional stories, folklore. A lot of them have really old origins, often superstitions, sometimes cryptids are involved. So the list also included all of the cryptids. And I was like, no. I could go down a black hole with cryptids.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not going to go into my feelings about cryptids at this stage.
We have to do something, though. We gotta do
Just
something.
so cynical about it.
I know. We'll have to come up with an interesting approach. But
All right. Urban legends are also generally supposed to be frightening. Mm-hmm. These days, you'll see a lot, like people are posting things like creepy pastas, which have created some of the newer urban legends, like Slender Man.
that one scared me
I
when
feel like-
first heard it.
Yeah. I feel like black-eyed children tend to be a little bit newer.
Yeah.
Again, it gets complicated because I could tell you stories that somebody told somebody that told somebody and then they wrote about it in a blog post. It's tricky. Black-eyed children scare the ever-loving crap out of me.
Yeah.
But today, we're mostly going to be talking about some of the classics.
Okay.
Okay.
I can at least think of one or two.
Okay. Well, let's see if they're on the list.
Okay.
So most of these, I also kind of wanted to focus on the ones that had a basis in fact, had sort of a nonfiction twist to them. And many of them are kind of meant almost like original nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
In that they have like a lesson or like a warning. Mm-hmm. The first one I'm going to talk about, I didn't actually really find a story that could have possibly triggered it. I think this one just kind of hits a nerve because it's not entirely out of the realm of possible. But this urban legend is the killer in the back seat.
Yes, that's one of the ones.
Okay.
Okay.
So, as I think everybody knows, but we'll go over it, the story typically centers around usually a woman alone in her vehicle driving down a quiet road. Usually it's like her, and that's it. And then another vehicle comes up behind her and starts tailgating her, flashing their high beams. Sometimes they're swerving a little. In some versions, they even bump her car with theirs. The woman goes home, which would be stupid, or stops somewhere and realizes that there was actually somebody hiding in the backseat of her car. And the driver behind her was reacting by doing all of the above anytime the person in the backseat popped up as if they were going to attack her. And then the killer would duck back down again. Because, of course, she's looking in her rearview mirror going, what the heck? So they pop back down. Right. There are versions where the woman stops at a gas station and the attendant calls her into the building to say, oh, there's a problem with your credit card. I can't run it. And there they inform her that somebody got into the car while she was focused on the pump.
Which would kind of be possible sometimes.
And that's kind of what I'm like, that could happen. Do you remember, I didn't watch very many Saws, but I saw the first one. And in the first one, he gets one of the people by slipping into the back seat of the car at some point.
It's like in
that
a
scene
car park or something.
With the okay,
I just went
England.
British for a second. Not car park. What do you call them? Parking structure. Yeah.
Like a parking lot. And the mask. Anyway,
Yeah.
That was horrible. I do think that we see stories all the time on like Facebook town pages and stuff like, oh, my daughter's friend's cousin's friend was at the mall and somebody put a flyer on their windshield, and when she went to get it, someone snuck into her backseat.
Yeah. I've seen a TikTok of a lady who it was a joke, but her daughter like had seen her and then opened the door, like her passenger door, got in the front seat. And then she was like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, when you go to get gas though,
Yes.
you're not focused on your car. And why would you lock your door? You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. You definitely wouldn't. And I think now, today, cars are so easy to lock all four doors.
Yeah.
But certainly when they were manual, maybe you didn't always
That's
lock your
true.
back door and stuff, which I think was when more so this was from. Certainly I heard it when I was a child, but I think it would have been easier back in the day. I like to think, though, that I would hear somebody open my back door if I was getting
If you were
gas.
alone, like if it was
Yeah.
you were the only one in the gas station.
But if I did have to go in,
wouldn't you
you
lock the
could
door
have.
though?
I think I would
I
have.
think, yeah, especially if it's at night.
I know these are also not for people that solely listen to scary
That's
podcasts.
true. Or have anxiety.
Yeah. But so I think we see it as like a warning all the time. Like now it's more so in the vein of human trafficking.
Yeah, yeah.
But so that's the first one. The rest of them, there's 4 more, all have a nonfiction story that kind of goes along with them.
So you couldn't find any nonfiction?
No.
No?
No. Where they really, I think you more so see, like my little tidbit for that story is if you think you're being followed by somebody,
Go to the police
do not go home.
No, no.
Go to the police station
Yeah.
or fire department or wherever.
How, if you were the driver, first of all, how can you see when it's nighttime? Like, let's poke holes in this. If you could, you wouldn't be able to really see that someone was being attacked. You would see another person in the back seat.
Yes.
And you would probably think, okay, it's their passenger. Right? Like, you wouldn't be like,
wildly wielding the
Right.
largest butcher knife
like
in the
out
world.
the window, but also in.
True. Yes. Yeah. And
Like, how would you, if you were the other driver, what would you do?
I don't
Like, would you
even-
honk and be like, hell, I feel like you would honk.
I feel like you would honk. I feel like, I mean, okay, so for the high beams and stuff, I do think maybe they were trying to get her to like pull over.
Or, yeah, yeah.
Which, again, don't do. If somebody's,
No.
you do the right thing by don't do that either.
Right.
But I don't know. I guess you would follow them.
I think I would just keep honking.
And
And
maybe-
then call the police
Yes,
and
like,
be like,
these days say, this is where I'm at, this is the license
True.
plate,
There-
some things.
at the
yeah.
time, no, not everyone had like either a car phone or a cell phone.
No.
So, yeah. Okay. I don't know. You have to put yourself into each situation.
Yes.
That's why it's fun and scary at the same time.
And then, if you're the guy in the back seat who's trying to... I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Okay, so moving on. It's Halloween time. So we're going to talk about poisoned candy. So we've all seen posts. Again, check your kids' candy. Oh my God, there was a needle in my Snickers. And, this house was handing out edibles, which, like, candy's expensive, but, like, okay, money bags.
Yeah.
Handing out edibles. Where are you at? So we all know now we get individually wrapped candy. You don't take homemade stuff from people's houses. But, like, why? Has it ever really happened? So no child has ever died as a result of eating candy that had been tampered with by a stranger.
Right.
Most cases of claims that candy was messed with were actually accidental or intentional deaths perpetrated by family members who tried to divert the blame. So there was an example of, there was a kid who got into his uncle's heroin stash and died. And the parents, in order to save the uncle, said, oh, it was tainted Halloween candy.
Wait, that's a real thing?
That is a thing that actually happened.
So instead of... Okay.
And then there's like, kids have heard the story so long that some of them fake it. So they will add stuff to the candy and be like, oh my God, look what I found.
Yeah.
Because, you get attention. However, on Halloween 1974, 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien was killed by his father, Ronald O'Brien. Ronald had laced one of Timothy's Pixy Stix with potassium cyanide. To make himself look less suspicious, he handed out poison Pixy Stix to his daughter and 3 other kids. But thankfully, none of the rest of them ate any. He was trying to collect insurance money as he was deeply in debt. And he was convicted and sentenced to death for murdering his son.
I feel like a lot of people are familiar with that one because I feel like that's the only case where at one point they were like, someone poisoned the candy in the community. Like, they didn't just go, oh, you poisoned your kid. It was like...
Yeah, because the guy claimed, oh, I went to this house and the lights were off. He claimed this particular house, no one was there. But he decided to go back on his own to that house.
Which is so weird.
The guy slipped his arm out. He claims like all he saw was a hairy arm. Literally like a hairy arm. And handed him 5 Pixy Stix. And
then you were just like, cool, thanks, to a grown man.
Kids. And so they found out he had purchased the cyanide.
Where do you get cyanide?
In 1974. I don't know.
What? I don't...
The dark web now.
But even in 1974, where do you get... Like, what is the purpose for you to have cyanide?
I want to say pest control.
Okay.
Hold on.
Potassium cyanide, right?
Yeah. Yes. So cyanide and cyanide-containing compounds are used. Thank you so much, health.ny.gov.
Shout out.
Compounds are used in pesticides and fumigants, plastics, electroplating, blah, 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 blah. So, yes, pesticides.
But they don't sell that as a pesticide now, right?
Now, I don't think so. Not like just loose like that. Like, I can't imagine you can just buy cyanide somewhere.
It would have to be in, like, whatever. You can buy, like, rat poison, but it's usually, like, in a container.
All the other kids, they found everybody else's except one kid. His parents couldn't find the pixie stick. And it turned out he had taken it to bed with him. He was going to eat it. But he fell asleep before he could eat it. And so they found it, thank goodness. But, yeah, so that guy's a piece of garbage. So that's really the only case of actually poisoned candy that has killed a child.
And it would have found its way. He would have found a way to, like, you know.
Murder his kid.
I feel like people are shitty.
That's just, and he did have a life insurance policy out on both children. So I think he kind of looked at her as like, well.
Can you imagine if you're like the other kid and you're like, that could have been me?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
It's really messed up. But he, no longer with us.
Good.
So now we're going to talk about Bloody Mary.
Okay. Well, I know. I think I know both. Like, Bloody Mary was a...
There's a number of options, yes. Yeah. So, okay, Bloody Mary. I don't think that I knew, like, why we were doing it as kids. I know it was just supposed to be like, oh, maybe you'll see her face. But, so today, we would go into a dark room, usually a bathroom. You look in the mirror, and you say Bloody Mary's name. I always did it 3 times. Some sources say 13, which seems excessive.
I thought 3.
I thought 3 too. And then I was like, maybe I was confusing it with Beetlejuice, but I think it's 3.
No, I think it's 3.
Okay. So you say her name 3 times. Bloody Mary will appear in the mirror, and she may just sit there and scream at you, or she may attack you, scratch your face. She's likely covered in blood, as the name suggests. This actually seems to be a take on a much older practice. So originally, there was a divination ritual where women ascended a staircase in their darkened home, holding a candle and a mirror. They looked in the mirror and hopefully saw the face of their husband to be. If they saw a skull instead, they would meet their demise before getting a chance to ever meet their husband.
I don't think I played that way.
No, this is old.
Okay,
like when
okay.
you had, yes. No, this is quite old. And I think now, because kids are the ones that play it, it probably got
Oh, yeah.
downgraded to just,
Ooh.
yeah, I know, spooky. So it could be that Mary is purely fictional and she has no ties to a real person. But there are several options that people think may have inspired the story.
Take your pick.
So, Mary the First of England, aka Mary Tudor, was actually known as Bloody Mary by Protestants during her reign as queen. She tried to bring Catholicism back to England because, if you remember, her lovely father, Henry VIII, famously decided to make Protestantism the religion of England so that he could get divorced from her mother. And in doing so, Mary had almost 300 Protestants burned at the stake.
She did?
Yes, she did. She told them either get out or convert, and many were exiled, but many of them
Dang.
said no, and so she killed them. Elizabeth Bathory,
Yes.
who should be familiar to a lot of people, anybody who's listened to spooky podcasts before, I didn't realize she was from Hungary, but she was a noblewoman from Hungary. And she and 4 servants were accused of killing girls and women. One number mentioned as many as 650 people.
Yeah.
Torturing them, bathing in their blood. The idea was that it would keep her younger. She was imprisoned and died suspiciously, but most people believed that the stories were actually false. A lot of the witnesses that they had were telling... It was hearsay. They were like, I heard somebody say. There was nobody who actually saw her do anything.
Slander.
Yeah, basically.
Isn't it Kathy Bates played her in the witch season of...
No.
That wasn't...
Madame
it
Lalaurie.
was different.
Yes.
Right, because she was in Louisiana.
An
Okay.
actually
I always...
horrific
Yeah.
person. Yes.
I always confuse the two.
That was a brutal... Her whole part in that show was... Ugh.
I think that was her first part.
Weirdly, the next person is kind of, sort of similar. Mary Worth. She was a woman who lived in Illinois in the 1860s, and she was part of essentially a reverse Underground Railroad.
Okay, this seems familiar.
Yeah, I had not ever heard of it, but she would bring in slaves under the guise of helping them to freedom just to send them back to the slave owners, and she would get paid by them for returning them. So there were rumors in the town that she actually used slaves in rituals and practiced witchcraft. Mary Worth was eventually lynched by the townspeople in her own yard, and she's said to haunt the area. So you have all of these women who, I mean, Mary Tudor, just, I don't know, whatever. She's just a, I don't know.
Go say it.
Listen,
Tim.
I'm like, your situation was awful. You didn't have to do that to all those people.
Yeah.
Anyway, but especially Elizabeth Bathory and Mary Worth. Mary Worth was a bad person, if she was part of a reverse Underground Railroad.
I didn't know there were any.
I didn't know that was a thing either, but I guess. I mean, I suppose I knew it was a thing. I just didn't realize it would have been called that.
Yeah.
But you have these women who died in really violent, probably, ways. And so the idea is that either could be haunting their areas. So we don't know. I mean, the other question is, some people, I've never been part of a group that ever said like, hey, oh my God, I totally saw a Bloody Mary. But there must be people out there who've claimed to see something in the mirror. Really, they're probably just a bunch of liars. However, there are ways that the brain could trick you into seeing things in those scenarios.
Yeah.
So the brain can experience illusions from things like self-hypnosis, Troxler's fading, and apophenia. So self-hypnosis is exactly what it is. Like you're in a dark room, you're either there's like candles or something. So flickering light, really, you're staring into this mirror. I don't know. I never sat there for very long. If I said it 3 times and it didn't happen immediately, I was leaving.
Yeah.
But Troxler's fading is this weird thing that the example that I found online is, so it's like a GIF, and this particular one is how it was designed, but it can happen for a lot of things. And there's like a plus sign in the middle of a circle. And the circle is made up of other circles. And they almost look like they're moving. Like one by one, they blink off.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks like the circle's spiraling. And as you're staring at the cross in the middle, the circles disappear.
Yeah.
And they don't actually, but your brain is just focused on this thing and everything else is fading out.
Right.
And then apophenia is when your brain connects two things that are unrelated and makes them make sense.
Which
Creates a connection.
happens a lot.
Yeah. Oh, it happens
All the time.
I think most superstitions are based on apophenia. I wore my green hoodie today and I won Keno, so I'm always going to wear my green hoodie.
Yeah, but I always feel like there's a green, like, what if I didn't? What if I didn't? And then I missed out.
You can't take the chance. What's the harm in just
True,
wearing
yeah.
the green hoodie? So obviously that's not it's like your brain taking in bits of information. So if it sees something moving and you're in this headspace that you're interacting possibly with a spirit and you're seeing something, you're amped up enough that your brain's going to go, oh my God, it must have been that. Obviously that doesn't happen to everybody. Who knows? But there are those are just some of the potential reasons people have claimed to do it besides just being big fat liars. Okay. So next.
Now we know how Kim feels.
Don't lie to me about seeing a ghost. That's all I'm saying. Now, this story is called a couple of things, but I like the calls coming from inside the house.
Mm-hmm. There's gotta be.
There is a very real story about this, unfortunately.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell it first.
So, in this story, also called The Babysitter, different things. A babysitter is watching some children, doing what babysitters do. The kids are upstairs asleep. The babysitter's just hanging out, watch TV. An unknown caller calls the house and tells the babysitter that she should check on the children. Again, they're upstairs asleep. She's like, this is probably a prank call, and she ignores it. The caller calls back a few times and starts to freak the babysitter out enough that she calls the police. The police say they'll trace the call, which, what? That's not how it works. But the caller calls back again. The police contact the babysitter and tell her to get out of the house immediately. The call was coming from inside the house. So the idea probably would have been that there was like a second landline.
Yeah.
In some versions of the story, the kids are killed. In other versions, she saves them and they're fine. In some versions, she's killed and they're fine. Unfortunately, on March 18th of 1950, 13-year-old, I think it's Janet. It's spelled Janett. So I keep wanting to say Jeanette, but I don't know.
I feel like Jeanette would have an E at the end.
Yeah. So Janet Christman was babysitting for the Romack family in Missouri. And the son was already asleep when she got there. The parents told her, don't let anyone in unless you know them, obviously. If someone comes to the door, turn the porch light on so you can see who it is first. And the father showed her his gun that he kept by the front door. Like, this is how you look. Listen, don't, I guess 1950 was a different time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Show somebody else's kid how to use your gun. Anyway, so fine. So they shut the porch light off before they left. She really only needed to turn it on if someone came to the door.
No, keep it on all the time.
I know. That's what I would do. So at some point in the evening, Mrs. Romack called the house, but she didn't get an answer. And she figured, no biggie, Janet's probably sleeping. But at 10:30 p.m., a call came into the local police station. There was a girl on the line screaming and asking for them to get there quickly, that she needed help. And then the line went dead. Now, unfortunately, at the time, without her telling them where she was, there was no way for them to know
They
what house
couldn't
she was at.
trace her. I mean, because she called from the landline.
A landline, but it's 1950. They don't
They
have,
don't have
like,
a
caller
thing.
ID.
Not a caller ID, but like I don't know how they trace things.
They couldn't. They
Okay.
couldn't. So they basically were like, we hope she calls back. So the Romax returned to their home at 1 a.m. The door was unlocked and the front porch light was on. When they went in, they found Janet on the floor with a head injury laying in a pool of blood. She'd been sexually assaulted and strangled with an electrical cord. The phone was off the hook and laying on the floor next to her. Thankfully, their son was safe upstairs.
Like nothing happened to him.
There was only ever one suspect in the murder, and he was a friend of the family who also knew Janet. And Janet had babysat for him before. She was like the neighborhood babysitter.
Wait, so he was like an adult?
Yes.
Like he wasn't a... Okay.
Yeah. And he had called Janet and said, hey, can you babysit for me tonight? And she said, no, I'm babysitting for the Romax. He had actually gone to the same social event as the Romax.
Oh.
And left at 10 p.m. to tend to his sick child that he said he had. But there was never enough evidence to convict him. They said that there was like a sawhorse under one of the windows and a window had been broken. But they think he did that to make it look like she didn't know who he was. Because in reality, he just came to the door. She unlocked it, turned the porch light on and let him in.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But he made it look like it was an intruder. So,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately, again, he was never arrested.
So, well, I mean, we don't really know, but do you think it was he mad that she was like busy, or was he just like, oh, opportunity?
From the sounds of it, this guy was a bit of a creep.
Okay. So
To
it could,
begin
if
with.
she had babysat for him, it could have been.
He was creepy.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, or worse. Finally, we come to the hook.
Oh, yeah. That wasn't even the one I was thinking of, but yeah.
Okay, so the hook, or the hook man, I don't know. This story involves typically a young couple hanging out in a car in a remote area, or like a lover's lane, for whatever that's silly. They are, again, in the car, so they just hear a news story on the radio about an escaped serial killer or mental patient or whatever from a local hospital / jail / whatever. And, oh, it just also so happens that one of his hands was lost somehow and he has a hook in its place.
I can't believe there's gonna be a real story, but God.
Well, yeah. So in some versions, they'll hear like scratching on the roof or the door of the car. Sometimes one of them, usually the guy, leaves to investigate the sound, which, again, why? You just heard a news story. Stop it.
Yeah, just turn the car on and
Yeah,
go.
leave. You're fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do. So sometimes one or both are killed. Almost every time, a hook is usually found attached to the car somehow. So like stabbed. I think I've heard like stabbed into the roof, hooked onto the door handle.
How many hooks does this guy have? He's just like,
I know,
I'll
he
leave
just-
my hook here.
You can just leave them about. Wow. So
Like, that's pretty expensive. What do you call it? Calling card.
he must have had a lot made. He must have a hook guy.
Who's your hook guy?
So this part's only funny because that's not entirely true. The hook does not play a part in the actual story. So the urban legend became kind of widely known in the 1960s when it was published as part of a Dear Abby column. A woman wrote in to Dear Abby and was like, I don't know if this story is true, but if you care about, like, she was like the 1960s version of that lady on the town Facebook page that has to like cause drama. Anyway, she shared this story on the Dear Abby column, and I think that's kind of how it got legs. But a very similar real story is the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. There was a 1976 movie about this called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and it was remade in 2014, and I think I saw that version on Netflix a few years ago. So it is about these murders. Obviously, Texarkana, it happened in a small area where they're like twin towns. One's in Arkansas, one's in Texas. They're right on the border of the two states. And these murders occurred between February and May of 1946. So it was quite some time before the story came out in the news. 4 couples were attacked in that, 3-month time span. 3 were on secluded roads, typically in vehicles, and 1 couple was actually in their home. No hooks were involved. The perpetrator had a gun instead.
Somehow a gun makes it, like, as the person hearing the story, it makes it less spooky.
Yes.
Like, I feel like if you have, like, a hook or a knife or something, it's more, like, intimate, but, yeah.
Well, you're, like, definitely deadlier, but for some reason, less off-putting. I don't know why.
I don't know why either.
Well, anyway, not that
we're
giggling about guns.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, when you... Yes. The knife is just very intimate. It's very close. You have to get physically close to a person.
You know, I heard a story about somebody who used a hammer to attack somebody, and there's something about that.
Yeah.
So 4 couples were attacked in that 3-month time span. 5 of the 8 victims were killed. No one was ever convicted or arrested in the murders. There's debate as to whether all 4 attacks were actually the same person. Especially, I think, one was in a house. Like, the other 3, the guy never... And it was also an older couple. These people were in their 30s. One of the couples was, like, 15 and 17. So it's a different MO entirely.
Who wasn't killed? Like, they couldn't identify...
So, like, I think in one pair, the boyfriend got away. And...
But he didn't see anybody?
No,
like,
well, so there's debate. So bear in mind the time frame and the area. Oh, I think he was a light-skinned black man, but I think he was wearing a mask. But I think, so it was very unclear. There were several suspects listed, some white, some black. It didn't really... And I didn't want to dive too much in it because I actually envision this story being something that I could potentially do later. Just because it does have that element of like, you're hanging out, you're in your car, you're trying to be romantic. And in the 40s, you're in your teens. Where do you go to be by yourself with somebody that you're on a date with? So, and then this guy just comes out of nowhere and it's also unsolved. Which means it's going to be infuriating. Yeah. He's also very dead at this point. But so if I recommend, or maybe not for you, maybe you don't watch The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Maybe I will rewatch it.
I do. It is familiar to me. I haven't seen it,
But, so those were some of my most well-known urban legends, I would say. There are certainly some from other areas. I found, versions of like Bloody Mary that were from, oh gosh, I forget. It might have been Japan. So I feel like everybody sort of has a version of it.
Yep.
Because again, I think they are supposed to tell lessons. They're supposed to keep you in line. Especially the poison candy and the hook and don't go out with your boyfriend at night by yourself. Like,
yeah. Virgins never die in the scary movies.
Scream rules. I know. So, so this was a little less. I wanted to be a little more lighthearted. Certainly people still were killed. There's not good things about it. But
I don't think we're going to have... We're always going to have an element of awful. But that's why you listen. It's morbid curiosity.
Don't you love it?
No,
I
that was
love the
good.
awful. Thank you. It was one of my shortest. We're at like 40 minutes right now.
Really?
So,
Yeah, you're usually the lengthy one.
I know, I never shut up about it. So, yeah, that's the first in our probably more Halloween-y type stories. So,
Exciting.
great. Go watch Urban Legends. It's a movie. I don't remember it, but
I liked it.
okay, great. Jilly liked it, so go watch it. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye. Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relativelyweirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week. Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relativelyweirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.